Greetings and välkommen! I'm Catherine of Skye and I hope to make your day refreshingly Swedish. So today's recipe is not exactly Swedish, slightly not. It is a Polish recipe for pork chops with a side dish of mashed potatoes. My mom taught me how to make this dish, and she was born in Russia and then immigrated to Poland when she was a very young person, and then stayed there until she was around 18, and then she moved to the United States where she got citizenship. But she grew up between Russia and Poland, and her mom was actually from Lithuania, and her dad was from Russia. So she was kind of a mix of all cultures. She spoke very fluent Russian and Polish and German and English, all the languages. So I'm really excited to bring this to you. My mom died in January, so I kind of want to make a video to remember this recipe as long as I can. So the ingredients for this recipe are pretty simple. We need the pork. We have a pork fillet right here. I'm probably only going to use about half of this because we don't really need to cook the entire thing. We also have potatoes. Now I am just using regular potatoes. This is the closest we have in Sweden to just sort of those brown skin potatoes that are very common in the US, like Idaho potatoes. This is wheat flour. Then we have some salt, pepper in the grinder, and then we have regular butter. This is salted butter. You can use unsalted, whatever you like. And then we have an egg. You may need 2 eggs depending on how many pork chops you cook. And then we have some cooking butter over here. Remember, never use margarine in frying pans. We're going to fry these pork chops today. But yeah, regular margarine doesn't break down the fats well when it gets to heat. So make sure you use a cooking safe, either regular butter or a cooking butter. All right, now the very first thing we want to do is take these potatoes and we're going to peel them. All right, I'm not going to peel all of them on camera, but just so you get the idea, you can use a potato peeler. I've always used a knife. It was very funny because at the end of her life, my mom, she had a stroke before she died, a few years before she died, but she always was telling me, we don't need potato peelers. It's such a waste. And especially her father always said, don't use a potato peeler because it takes off too much of the potato. So the idea was for me to learn how to peel potatoes, peel the skins off to use or take off as little of the potato part as possible. So that's what I'm trying to do here. And then what we want to do is we're going to get these potatoes and we want to cut them into sizes that are very much the same. So we have small potatoes like this. We also have much bigger ones like this. So we want to, and there's even a tiny one like this. So this one is the smallest unit we have. So we want to make sure the potatoes are about the same size. So we're going to take this potato and we're just going to cut it in half. Be very careful as you do this. Do it on a cutting board if you need to, and then just put it in the pot. And later we'll fill the pot with water. For now, we're going to peel the rest of these, and then I will cut back to when we can start the boiling. Before we do that, I just wanted to mention that I'm peeling over a plate just to catch the peels, so it's much easier to throw it into either a compost box or your recycling. In Sweden, we do have food recycling here that goes toward the bioenergy that powers our buses and other things like that. So I like to do that just over a plate, so it's just easier to shove that in. And then the pot prevents the need for washing another dish. We can just toss stuff into there and then just pour the water in and we're good. So I have been reminded by my wonderful partner Mathias that in Sweden we have these very special potatoes. They're a different brand or breed than the American potatoes that one typically gets, the really brown ones with really thick skin. As you can see, the skin on these guys is really, really super thin, and I'm reminded that that's where all the vitamins are. So I have just kind of scoured all the dirt off and they are ready to be boiled. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on to high heat water. And we're just going to kind of cover just the tops of the potatoes with the water. Just make sure they're fully covered. And then we're going to take them out. Oopsies. That was very bad camera work. We apologize. Okay, let's take these out and then take them over to the stove. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this on heat 9. Now remember, this is an induction stove that I have. And there we go. Go on to P for power. I thought it was P for pause. But anyway, that's going to get going. Now we do want to add stuff like salt. Tiny salt shower. That's just for seasoning. And then I'm going to put the lid on. Okay, so there we go, lid on. Now we're going to let these guys boil for a while until they are ready, and then we're going to test their doneness. But while we're doing that, let's get on to the main meal. All right, so as I always do, I always open the meat in the sink because there's always some juices in here that we probably just want to kind of not spill all over the counter. That kind of helps with keeping the kitchen clean a bit. So we'll take the meat out of the plastic packaging here, or whatever you happen to have. All right, and then as you can see, there's a lot of juice spilling out of here. So then I'm going to rinse it just a little bit, just with water. You don't need to get it with soap or anything. Now you can do this with pork chops, either a loin or on the bone, whatever you prefer. So as you can see, this piece of meat has a lot of fat on it. And you can either try to cut it off as it is now, but I usually find it easier to cut it off of the pork chop itself. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cut this in half, because I don't need to make the entire thing into pork chops today. And I'll put this half on. This was the potato peeling plate, so we don't have to wash it 10 times. I just rinsed it off after the peels. So then we're going to cut our pork chops into chops. So make them about maybe 1.5 centimeters wide, and you can see the ribbing of the fat there, but we're going to cut that off in just a minute. We just want to make these pork chops very consistent in their size. Make sure you use a very sharp knife, because a dull knife is what causes injury. Trust me, when you're struggling with stuff and you can't get it, that's what's going to cause the injury. Okay, so let's kind of put these guys to the side so that we can start to slice a little bit of this fat off. Okay, that's good. And we'll just leave this in the middle. I think it'll be fine. It'll be kind of like marbly. Okay, you don't have to take all of it off. Remember, pig fat tends to be pretty tasty. Can anyone say bacon? Let's get this off. A little bit too much on the side there. And just continue processing these pieces until you have your entire portion done. Now this might be the most perfect activity if you're feeling a bit angry. We have a meat hammer. I don't know what they're called. They're for pounding pork chops. This is what they do. So you can start off with the side with many or the fewer protrusions, and then we kind of go toward the lighter side later. But you're going to want to kind of beat the heck out of this thing. And what this does, I probably shouldn't talk while I'm beating. What it does, as you can see, it's making it thinner, for one. It's spreading it out, making it a bigger looking piece of meat. But more importantly, it's breaking down the fibers in the pork, so it's going to be nice and tender when we eat it. Make sure you do both sides. Now this pork loin, it looks like it's being beaten within an inch of its life. I think it's pretty nice meat. Sometimes pork can be pretty tough, so you might have to beat it forever. So we'll just finish off beating it with the lighter side. And just make sure it's a pretty consistent thickness all the way through. All right, so now that we have our pork chop, we're going to set it aside on a plate. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just put this pork chop on the plate right next to me, and then just kind of do the rest. And I'm not going to film all of the rest of these. I'm just going to do it until they're all done, and then we can get to the next step. As we're doing the next step, what you're going to want to do is make sure you have plenty of fats in your frying pan, your butter and all that kind of stuff. And make it sure it's a little bit warm, as in you want to sear stuff. Then we're going to crack an egg onto a plate. You might need two. You can always start with one and then add another after it. So you're just going to want to beat it with a fork or a whisk, either way. I'm getting it all over the place. We apologize for the inconvenience. So we'll just leave that there. That's going to be fine. And next, we can kind of spread the pork chops around the plate, and so we can season them, because that's going to be kind of important here. We're going to want to get out our salt and pepper. We're just doing really simple seasonings. So there's salt on one side. And then we're going to put pepper over the top as well. So make sure you get plenty of pepper, plenty of salt. Well, not too much salt, of course. You don't want it to be inedible. All right, so there's that. So let's turn them all over. I'm just going to use one hand so I have one hand at least clean. Okay, there we go. Again, let's start with the salt. Just take care for every one of them to have some salt on it. There we go. And then fresh cracked pepper is awesome. If you don't have a pepper grinder, I highly encourage you to get one. It's much more fragrant than if it's pre-ground. I used to use pre-ground pepper all my life, and then once I got a pepper grinder, I was like, oh my God, the world has changed. Now the next thing is to pour a tiny bit of wheat flour onto this plate over here. You don't need much. You can use like a tablespoon and have like 1 or 2 tablespoons out. Doesn't need to be much. It's kind of like, spread it out a bit. Okay. And then the next thing is the easy bit. We're going to take our pork chop. We're going to slather it in the egg. And then we dip it into the flour. And then we put it in the pan. Easy peasy. All right, let's do the next one. Pork chop, egg on both sides. Remember to do both sides. And then the flour. And then again, put it in the pan. And try to kind of place them in the pan so they fit like little puzzle pieces around each other. Let's get each of these in here. And at any time, if you run out of egg, if you run out of flour, just add more to your plates. Because this is like literally the simplest of ingredients. That one fits really nicely in the middle. All right, almost out of egg, but I think I can do actually all of them with just the rest that's left. Nice. Now I'm feeling that the heat is probably not high enough. So we're going to turn that up. Just a second. Okay. There we go. All right, nice. They all fit very nicely in here. Now, don't worry if you have a bigger family or you just want more to eat. You can cook as many as you want. You can do several pans full. So I'm going to turn this up so it kind of sears these things. And in a second, whenever they start to develop a little bit of a crust, then we're going to flip them over and do the other side. So as you see, they are frying pretty nicely right now. We're just going to let them do their thing. Let's see, are they getting ready? Oh, they're getting there. What we're looking for is a nice golden brown crust on these guys. Now, I forgot to mention it before, but we did set a timer for our potatoes for about 20 minutes. I had to ask my partner Mathias how long you cook these special Swedish potatoes for. And he says this time of year, about 20 minutes. So, yeah, I've learned so much about potatoes from him. They have different skin thicknesses depending on what time of the year they're grown, and different tastes as well. Now, as you can see, the sides of the pork is already starting to get a little bit fried. So let's go ahead and turn these guys over. Oh, this is exactly what we're looking for. Look at that. Nice kind of golden brown crust. Now you can actually put some more flour on these, but I'm not going to. I think it's going to be fine the way it is. I am going to turn down the heat. This has gotten a little bit too hot. Now we were looking for them just to start searing, and they certainly have done that. And they also have this really nice crust on them, which is really great. Now do notice that all of the pork chops are around the same thickness, and that's going to help you fry them for a consistent amount of time. Oh gosh, I probably should turn on the vent so I don't choke to death. But you will also start smelling the wonderful fragrance of cooking meat, and it really does smell very nice. So yeah, you don't want to have any really extra thick spots on your pork chops or anything, or else it's going to take that particular piece of meat a longer time to fry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that one out a little bit so it's not bronzed totally on both sides. But there we go. So we're cooking this. Now I probably should have started the potatoes a bit before. I thought this preparation was going to take a lot longer. I didn't anticipate that the pork loin was going to be so nice and fine. Normally, I remember my mom beating them to death with the meat hammer, and oh my gosh, it took her like 5 minutes per piece. So these were really quick, just a few swings of the hammer, and they were really, really nice and tender. So yeah, they look like they're doing really good. Let's check the underside. Yeah, they look pretty cooked. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it out and put it on a plate and test. Make sure that the pork is cooked through and through. You definitely don't want to have pork to be in any way raw. You want it always cooked. All right, so I have taken out one of these pork chops from the pan, and I just want to see, is it done? Let's open it up. Oh yes, that is cooked really nicely. So we're going to bring the rest of these out and then just leave them on the plate, and then we're going to finish off the potatoes. All right, so the next thing to do is test those potatoes. Are they done? Now my timer hasn't rung yet, but I kind of like had a sneaking suspicion. They should be boiling, but unfortunately when I took the pork chops out, my stove turned itself off. All this smart stuff is too smart. But as you see, I'm using the fancy poking stick that Mathias bought for me. He's like, use your fancy pricker, poker. I forgot what he said. Anyway, it's a thing. But yeah, if you poke it and they fall off, then they're definitely done. All right, so now we're going to get these potatoes and then drain them. There is one aspect of this whole procedure that I sort of forgot about at the very beginning of this video, was that I should not have used this particular pan, because this is a non-stick pot that I enjoy using for sauces and all kinds of things. But if you use a potato masher, and my potato masher is made out of metal, it's going to scratch this pot. So we definitely don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drain them with the colander, and then we're just going to pour them into a different pot. So we're going to pour them into just a regular stainless steel pot like this. And then I did forget one ingredient that we needed to have, which is milk. Let's see if you can see that. There we go. So we're going to put a little bit of milk in here. Actually, no, we're going to start mashing first, then we put the milk. Let's do the mashing. And these are really, wow, they are nice and soft. Man, I remember my mom mashing and mashing away at those Idaho potatoes they have in the US. It's pretty rough. But you don't need to mash them totally before you start adding the fun stuff, which is going to be the butter and the milk. So the first thing we definitely want to add is the butter, because the butter is going to need to melt. So these potatoes are really hot right now, so we're just going to put in some butter. Just got my little wooden butter slicer thing. I forgot what these are called. They have a name. I don't remember it right now though. Spreader. I think it's called a spreader. There we go. So we're going to put in some butter here. And the butter is obviously the amount of butter is going to depend on how many potatoes you have, what the quantity, volume, all that. So we can mash it in, and as it's getting mashed in, it's going to melt, which is convenient for us. So let's just keep kind of mashing that in. You can see, I don't know if you can see the steam rising off of these potatoes. They are really warm. So we don't have to over mash them either. I don't really like necessarily pureed potatoes. I like my potatoes to have a little bit of texture, which is one of the reasons I'm making real potatoes rather than potato flakes. Okay, so next what we want to do is we're going to add some milk. And then the other thing, which I forgot to talk about in the very beginning of the video, is we're going to add some creme fraiche. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. In the United States, I buy sour cream because I have never been able to find creme fraiche. Originally, this recipe is definitely with sour cream. It's a staple of Polish culture, and yeah, they taste really good with this kind of cream in them. But creme fraiche doesn't have that sour component to it, but it still has a nice amount of cream, and it's going to make these potatoes nice and creamy. So I usually kind of try to go for this sort of, I don't know, round style of smushing things together. Now, before we get too far, again, let's add some salt. You can also add pepper if you like, but I'm going to skip it. My mom wasn't really the biggest fan of pepper, but it's up to you whether you want to add it. Remember, the pork chops themselves do have some pepper on them. But the mashing is also a form of mixing. So all of this mashing means that you're not going to have to stir them together later to mix up the cream or the salt or any of that kind of stuff. So there we go. Okay, we now have mashed potatoes. So now all of our things are finished. Now, in reality, you're going to want to time this so that the potatoes are done when the meat is done, because right now the meat is getting a little bit cool. So I feel sorry for poor Mathias because he's going to have a cool dinner. So sorry. So here's our plate of food. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention is that you can make little designs in the mashed potatoes, and I'm trying to do this kind of backwards, but you can make little lovely little scallops. Well, these mashed potatoes are a little bit too sticky maybe, but in general, that's a tiny disaster, but you can kind of see the design and you can make them really pretty for your guests if you like. So let's taste and see how this is. Here we go. Now, my mom always made this with mushroom gravy. Unfortunately, she liked the mushroom gravy right out of a tin and mushrooms out of a tin, so it always tasted kind of like iron. So I elected not to put the gravy on this, but let's see how it tastes anyway. Oh wow, this is good. These pork chops came out perfectly. And I feel like, yeah, I had the right amount of pepper, right amount of salt. They're really good. Let's try the mashed potatoes. Really nice. They almost have this like sort of sweet taste. They're not sweet potatoes, but they have a little bit of sweetness and they're very, very creamy. Oh my goodness. The creme fraiche is really good. Now, if you use sour cream, it's going to add a little bit of tartness to that, which is also really nice. But these ended up really, really tasty. Plenty of butter, plenty of milk, and creme fraiche or sour cream, and you have an amazing dinner. So thank you so very much for joining me. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you next time.